Good afternoon, everybody. Would like to welcome you to our second webinar. We already have over 53 participants. If you may kindly, let us just get started. Can you kindly just put in the chat, your name, your company, which country you're coming from, so we can have a feel around the room who is online with us at the moment. We will then start the program in the next 10 minutes. Wow, we have a lot of participants here. Thank you for joining. We have Lafarge, we have World Bank, we have Global BP, we have Vision Funds. Thank you so much. Welcome. We have First Quantum. We have people from Zimbabwe. We have Mufulira Mine. Madison, welcome everybody. So nice to have you on board. It's a fantastic crowd. Eleanor from Sweden, thank you. Nigeria, Peter, Johannesburg, welcome. Cresta Golfview, welcome. We have Comesa, welcome on board. We're just getting the ball started so we get to know each other. I'm sure you can also see each other on the chat. Welcome to our Vice Secretary, Malandula from First Quantum. Thank you for joining. Matipa, our treasurer, thank you. Mount Meru, I can see you there. So let's just get warmed up. Abdul, if you may also equally just switch on your camera and join me. Thank you, Abdul.
Thank you, Mazia.
You can see we have people from all across Zambia and all across the world. It's amazing. It's amazing to have so many people. Casey and Philip, thank you for joining. Are you able to hear me? I'm seeing Margaret, you're saying you can't hear the speaker. Is everybody able to hear me?
We can hear you clearly.
Margaret, just check your settings, please. Nkana Water Supply, welcome. Thanks. Okay, thanks for the heads up. You can hear me loud and clear. We have National Road Fund, Zambia, and it goes on. Welcome, everybody. We'll just need to get started because of the time. We should stick to our time. We will just put up a poll because we just want to get the mood of everybody in the room and see how everybody's feeling regarding coming into this wonderful webinar that we have put together at Zambia Human Resources, Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management. So a poll will come on your screens. If you may just, put how your mood is, and we'll give that another 2 minutes. Okay, as we await the poll to get up and running, we'll just go into a bit of housekeeping rules. Of course, we do not want any network disturbances so that we're all able to see the presentation without any interruptions. So we will have all mics off, our cameras will be off, only the host and the speaker will have the cameras on. While the speaker is speaking, he will be the only one who will be present on the presentation. If you have any questions, which will be answered at the end of the speaker's presentation, please kindly put them on the chat. When you do put your question, kindly do give me an idea of your name and where you're coming from, so I'm able to, welcome you on your question, on the question and answer basis. So further to that, we can move on and welcome you once again. More participants are still joining. I think we can get running and going, right, Abdul? So the topic we are going into is turning employee experience into financial strategy. We are doing our best to engage you as HR practitioners and other practitioners in other fields on the modernized ways of keeping your employees engaged, motivated, looking at other areas in HR that may educate you and your business as well. So it's not only looking at it in an HR perspective, but as a business in totality. So we're really trying to educate you in all different forums, by having local presenters and international presenters. Today we have an international presenter, Abdul, who will later on, give a brief background of himself and his profile. I am your host for today, Mazila Mwenga. I am the Vice Council Secretary, and I will hand over the floor to our President just to do the opening remarks. Mr. President, you may go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator, Mazila Mwinga, our Council Vice Secretary. Let me start by recognizing you. Thank you for accepting to host us and for all the preparations that you had put in before today. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize our keynote speaker for this afternoon, Abdulhussain Tejani from UAE. I also take this opportunity to recognize our international participants who are taking part in our virtual webinar this afternoon. Let me just say, fellow participants, on behalf of the Governing Council of the Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management, I warmly welcome you to today's webinar with a topic of how to actualize employee experience and turn it into financial strategy. I am cognizant of the fact that by its very nature, the topic that we have for today, we have, like the host has mentioned, we have 9 HR practitioners joining us this afternoon. And I want to say a few words about our institute. The Zambia Institute of Human Resource Management is a professional body which was established under the Act of Parliament, Act number 11 of 1997. And among its mandate, of course, is to regulate, promote, and of course, develop the practice and science of human resource management in Zambia. Colleagues, I do believe that with the deep reservoir that we have of HR practitioners across the country and beyond, and of course with our affiliated companies that provide the HR services, as an institute, we are well placed to give the service to whichever organization that may need our services. The topic for today is turning employee experience into financial strategy. I'm very positive and sure that the topic is not just appropriate, but very interesting. And we are looking forward to listening to Tejani's presentation. The essence of having a financial strategy, if I may just add a bit, is to ensure adequate and regular supply of funds fulfilling the present and future requirements of the business or organization. Okay, in short, the financial strategy deals with availability of sources, usages, and management of funds. It focuses on the alignment of financial management with a corporate, with a corporate and the business objectives of an organization to gain a strategic advantage. I'm positive that some of these things I've mentioned, they will be well covered in the presentation that is coming after my speech. I think with these remarks, without taking away from the presentation that is coming, I wish to take this opportunity to officially open this webinar, and let's enjoy our learning this afternoon. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mazila.
Okay. Thank you, President. Thank you for that, that warm welcome remark that just also equally reminded us the reason why we are carrying this out and what we have on the table for all of you out there. Our polls, Abdul, our polls are showing that people are actually very excited. A lot of people are actually anxious to know about your presentation. We do have two people who are a bit lost. We will get them back on board as you go into the flow. Just before I hand over to you, Abdul, I also like to welcome our colleagues from Serbia and France, and again, Barbara and Yelena from the two countries, and their colleagues, and our colleagues again who have also pitched up from World Bank. So Abdulhussain Tejani, kindly introduce yourself to everybody on the platform. May you kindly also give them a feel of your experience and your background, just to get the anxieties and the momentum going and getting the two lost people on board. Thank you, Abdul.
Thank you very much, Mazila. Before I start actually introducing myself, allow me to say this. This is the first time that I'm actually doing a webinar where I have over 100 participants. Usually there is a limitation to how many people attend some of these webinars that I do online. But to actually have over 100 people, and that too outside of Zambia, is quite interesting. I wasn't expecting that. So you've taken me by surprise on that one. I'm not sure how it is, but I'm really happy to have so many participants, and that too all over the world. To give you a bit of background about myself, I am somebody who worked in the corporate world for about 23 years. I've worked with some amazing organizations. The likes of Compaq. I've worked with Standard Chartered Bank, British Petroleum, TNS, which at that time was one of the largest providers of market research. And then I went into pharmaceuticals with Merck Sharp and Dohme, MSD, where I eventually then moved on to the education field, where I worked with GEMS Education. After that, I actually set up my own consultancy 4 years ago. It's been an amazing journey. The first year was obviously very challenging when setting it up. The second year was amazing, hoping that I would hit the heights in year 3. Unfortunately, the world took a turn and we were hit with a pandemic, but nevertheless, learning continued. And as much as it's online, as much as it is not as effective as it is face-to-face, we continue to help people grow and develop themselves. And I'm also very fortunate to have quite a few people who are actually listening to me, who are known to me, and I really appreciate them being there to support us. And obviously, last but not least, I'd like to thank the ZIHRM to actually have me as one of their panelists for the day and speaker. I sincerely hope that people will participate and enjoy what I'm about to present today. The topic may seem a little dry, but I will try and make it very interesting. And the way I'm going to approach this particular topic is I'm going to give you a little bit of a background in terms of why I think it's very important. I will then move into how do you make it where you're able to link the financials of what you operate with as an organization, and how do you actually turn that into a value-adding exercise within the HR fraternity. And I will leave you with what I perceive as the future of HR and what I feel we need to actually evolve into as HR individuals as such going into the future. And given the fact that I have actually covered quite extensively around the world, where I've operated in Europe, Africa, Asia, Middle East, and North America quite extensively, I'm quite well aware of some of the different challenges. And given that I'm originally from Tanzania, I would like to give you a perspective of how some of the challenges we face in Africa can be overcome. Now, in as much as I'd like to say that there is a global solution to everything, I don't come from that school of thought. What I like to think about in terms of solutions is we need to take the solutions that are offered out there and customize it to fit our cultures. And that is extremely important, because a lot of what we tend to do is we're in a world where we think copy and paste is what is really required. But in reality, that doesn't work for us. It's like, you know, in some countries, democracy works. In some countries, socialism works. In some countries, dictatorships work. Now, I'm not going to be in a position where I'm going to be a judge and say this works, this should be how it is, or this should be how it is. It's a decision that each and every individual needs to make on their own, based on their own circumstances as such. But the one thing I would like to start off is to say, as much as I'm giving you the inputs, I want you to try and take it and customize it for yourselves. So with that as an introduction, I would like to move on to how it is that I wish to operate within today's presentation as such. So, as an introduction, I want you all to realize that we are in a place where we continuously evolve. And for the majority of the people that are on this particular webinar today are from Africa. And unfortunately, when you think about HR in Africa, one of the biggest challenges we face is we're not seen as a value add within the organization. We tend to be looked at as a cost center, which is pretty sad, because there are great examples of organizations in Africa who have been able to overcome this. And in some instances, some of you may be here already. However, let's talk about what it is that we need to address to try and bridge the gap. And the way I look at this personally from my 23 years of experience in the corporate world is, when I walk into an organization as an HR head, or as somebody who has got significant amount of experience and the ability to bring about change in an organization, my first port of call is to actually build a very strong relationship with finance. And unfortunately, that's usually the last place a lot of HR people want to build a relationship, because there is this unbroken or a rule that goes about that says there needs to be a Chinese wall between finance and HR. And we're always antagonists against each other, where I've always seen as the two departments to actually become partners. And for that to happen, you as an HR person have got to be interested in the numbers. If you're not interested in the numbers, and a good number of HR people don't like to associate themselves with numbers, you will find you're always struggling and playing catch up in terms of value add, in terms of having a seat at the table, as well as building that relationship with finance. So my first advice to people is to always understand what it is that you do as an organization. If you don't understand business, you will struggle to add value, because for any organization, an HR person, all right, if they don't understand business, will always offer HR solutions that are HR oriented, whilst the need of the hour is to actually find HR solutions that are business oriented. And a lot of times we struggle to make this connection because we don't understand the numbers. So we'll come to that a little later. The second part we need to actually do is to understand that the key to every organization's success is people. And we all know that as HR people. However, the challenge is we tend to look at everything holistically and say we have to do everything well. Well, my challenge to all of you today is to actually say, if you can start getting your recruitment right, the rest will fall in place. There is nothing more important within the HR function than getting the right people in place. Again, this is a topic on its own, but I would like us to actually get to a place where we realize that this is an area that we need to shore up. Think about recruitment in terms of how do you recruit? How do you make your choices? How do we actually integrate these people into the organization in terms of your onboarding structure? All right. And the whole development process that goes after that as such. So if we cannot get our recruitment process right, we will always struggle with everything else that we wish to do. The third thing is to ensure that we're holding ourselves accountable. The way we have held ourselves accountable in the past, unfortunately, is no longer going to work going forward. Because what we've got to understand very clearly is what brought us to where we are today will not take us to where we want to go. Because there are lots of things that are changing out there, and the goalposts keep getting wider and wider with what needs to be let in. So if you're not taking into account the change, you're always measuring yourself against what you've always measured yourself against the past. And unfortunately, you're expecting a different result, which is not going to happen. So when you think about these three things, you'll realize very quickly that these are the things that you need to start thinking very clearly about as we move ahead. Now, let's talk about what is really important in terms of the linkage between HR and finance. One of the things that we are very lucky to have today compared to our peers in the past, all right, is we now have access to data. And when you think about the amount of data we have at our fingertips today, it's immense. A simple example, all right? You want to do a search on Google or any other site out there, and you type in talent management. Within seconds, you'll get 3 to 4 million hits. That is phenomenal. The flip side of it is, how do we make sense out of everything that's out there? And that, for me, is the secret between success and averageness. And again, we'll talk about that a little later. 2, HR and finance never have to be antagonists. They should ideally be partners for each other. In fact, what I'm suggesting is a finance savvy individual needs to be part of the HR team going forward. Because if you think about it, you need to be able to present things with a business strategy in mind. And if you cannot present that numerically, where a decision needs to be made based on very little information, very little time in some instances by the senior managers, your ability to articulate something monetarily makes a lot more sense. And I will go through an example as well. And the metrics that we use are going to be very critical. The metrics that HR used to reporting in the years that have passed are no longer valid today in most instances. And I'm going to share with you metrics that I think are going to be key going forward in terms of what it is you need to actually measure that shows you're adding value, that shows you're business savvy, that shows you deserve a seat at the top table. All right. So with those three things in mind, let's talk about how. Now, first characteristic you need to have in terms of understanding the business model, all right, is you have to understand where in the whole chain that you are actually adding value. Are you adding value by just being there to be a policeman? Are you adding value by just being there to actually push your policies? Are you there to make sure that people are showing up on time, leaving on time? Are you there to make sure that people are just filling up their performance appraisals? That is no longer the role that is required of the new HR person. You also have to understand how to read numbers from a perspective of P&Ls and balance sheet. Where do you make your money? Where do you lose your money? Who is your competition? What do they have that you don't have? Where are they scoring over you? Do you understand what the client needs? Or are you telling me you're so far removed from the client that you no longer feel that you actually need to connect with the client? If as an HR person, you have no idea what your client needs, and I'm not talking internal client, I'm talking external clients. If you have no clue what they are looking for and how their industry is going to evolve in the future, all right, you are addressing needs that are historical in nature and not futuristic. So you need to understand how to actually read what is happening externally as much as you are doing it internally. And last but not least, you're looking at trying to help individuals grow and develop. HR can never, ever be part of the senior management or as part of the people. You have to be the bridge. And to be the bridge, you should always try and find a way to make sure that both parties are actually talking to each other, helping each other grow, helping each other to understand where some of the challenges are and how do we actually work together to overcome them. In the indicators section, you will actually see how to spot these ideas, all right? You need to understand every facet of the business. If you are in manufacturing, for example, do you understand how your raw materials gets to you? Where is this raw material? How is it being transported to you, all right? How does this transportation help or not help getting the raw material to you in a timely manner? Once it's in, how is it stored? Once you understand how it's stored, is there wastage? How do we overcome that? All right. How do we put this raw material to use out there? How do we actually then put the finished product in a place whereby we are in a position to make sure that we're able to deliver on time? How do we transport all of these things that we're producing to the end client? So if you don't understand every facet of how your business is done, you will not be able to add value. All right. Remember, the thing that we actually need to understand and be very cognizant of is this business belongs to us. If we don't own it, somebody else will. And when the other person who does not understand the whole aspect of the business, they will look at it from their own viewpoint. There are very few entities within the organization that has a holistic view, and HR is one of them. And if you don't participate from a holistic perspective, you will always end up being an entity that is seen as a cost center. And the last part is, as HR people, the role of the future is you've got to be a consultant. You can no longer afford to be the policeman. You can no longer afford to be the gatekeeper. You can no longer afford to be somebody who just delivers on one specific thing on a regular basis. You have to learn to actually balance everything together and bring it together like a jigsaw puzzle. So you've got to start ensuring that you are also updating yourself, updating your skills, growing yourselves to continuously add value. Read a lot, listen to a lot of experts out there, network a lot. Only then will you start to understand how the whole thing comes together. Only then can you start to add value, because you're bringing in different perspectives. All right, that's number one. Number two, how do we utilize the data that we have? Unfortunately, we have a reputation in HR whereby we're always seen as people who are emotional. All right, we bring emotion to the table, hoping that people will see it from our perspective. Gone are those days. We now have to present ourselves in a more evidential manner where we're actually proving what we want to prove. Because if you cannot prove it with data, emotion will only take you a certain way. Ask yourself the question, how many times have you actually sat in front of the senior management where you've actually tried to present an idea from HR, where you've talked about how it's a nice thing to have, the morale will be boosted, people will feel good, they'll start to feel engaged, and suddenly somebody in there starts asking some very awkward question. On what basis are you making this particular argument? All right, do you have any evidence about it? And unfortunately, we fall into that trap quite often. So it's quite important for us to understand how to bring data to life. All right, and being able to talk through these numbers. Otherwise, what will end up happening is we will end up in a place where we feel, all right, that we have tried our best, but we are not able to justify our numbers because we don't understand these numbers. So take an interest in the numbers. All right, so try, it's you know, when you're thinking about data, it's like market research. Market researchers collect data out there. All right, once they've collected this data, they put it together into a software that churns out certain insights. And from this insight, they anticipate what is going to happen. So the insights are not only enough to actually say, okay, this is what the insights are telling us. You have to interpret what it means for you as HR, what it means for you as an organization. All right, so you have got to learn to use the numbers and present the impact. Otherwise, what will happen is we will always end up in a place where we talk emotion. All right, again, from an inspiration perspective, how many of you would be in a position, for example, to actually take a lot of data and make sense out of it? Believe it or not, it's an art. And for a lot of us, let's say if we don't have ERP systems, we're still using Excel. Trust me, Excel is extremely powerful. How many people know how to manipulate Excel to be able to get those insights that you're looking for and then derive meaning from it? Trust me, if you actually have to walk away from today in terms of thinking, what do I need to do? I would suggest you need to go out there and learn advanced Excel, because advanced Excel can give you tremendous scope with regards to gaining insight from data. Characteristic number 3. We've got to be curious, but not curious from a perspective of just being openly curious. It has to be purposeful. It cannot be in a place where you just open a Pandora's box and think, okay, I want to know everything and anything. What you need to be very cognizant of here is make your curiosity like a target that is addressing a particular business need, which means you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone, because to a large extent, HR is very comfortable within HR. But the moment you ask HR to move out of its space and talk about marketing, talk about compliance, talk about finance, talk about strategy at a holistic level, you know, we struggle with this because we're always stuck within that loop of being in HR. And it's time for us to break that boundary. In fact, I want us to now move away from thinking of ourselves as HR. I nowadays, as a consultant, all right, refuse to call myself an HR consultant. I think of myself as a change architect. And I specifically chose that title because I look at myself as being somebody who can help organizations and individuals manage change. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because change is constant. All the other factors fall into the change aspect. So when you think about your role as not only managing HR, but managing people, managing the organizational's best assets. All right. We're so stuck up sometimes with titling, we tend to actually think only in terms of title. The problem with titles is, unfortunately, it's limiting sometimes. Today, we have great titles that are coming out that we have never been there before. Things like Chief Happiness Officer. What's the role of a Chief Happiness Officer? Realistically, a Chief Happiness Officer is somebody there who addresses the needs of people to make sure that they're really happy within the organization. How is that different from you as an HR person? Is that any different? You'll find that you're almost addressing exactly that same need. All right. When you think about it from that perspective, it's time to move away from the way we've siloed ourselves and realize that HR cuts across every facet of the business. And the more you actually reflect your title to address that, the more you will start to realize that you are seen as more inclusive and more part of the whole organization. You're always looking to find ways to anticipate where a problem might come up and find ways of being proactive. You can no longer afford to wait until somebody addresses the way they come to you and say, we have a problem. So you've got to overcome that, be proactive. And you've always got to find ways of networking and collaborating with people. The world that we live in today, unfortunately, is very limiting in that we've been brought up to always think that we have to win and win by ourselves. Well, as you can see, the world out there has changed, all right? Collaboration is very key to the success of futures. Let me ask you this. For those of you that are well aware, for example, Amazon. Amazon is succeeding not because it's actually doing all the right things by itself. All the goods that are provided by people who wish to sell their products on Amazon. So in reality, they are collaborating with all the producers, the suppliers of goods and services. So when you think about it, one of the most successful companies in the world is built on collaboration. Think about, let's say, if I were to look at Zambia, all right? You have a very robust economy that's based around mining, all right? I'm sure you have organizations where you have all the people within the mining industry sitting together across a table and talking about areas that they feel very strongly about, all right? I want us to take that one step further. I want us to start talking to each other from a perspective of, look, why do we always have to build different infrastructures for everyone? Why don't we build a central repository of some of the things that we actually do and need without having to build everything together? For example, all right, look at transportation of copper. How is copper transported? Do you all have a systematic way where you actually have one particular mode of transportation, or do you share? Right? It's just one small example. How many such examples can you come up with? All right. So when you think about what it is that we are doing within HR, this aspect of curiosity, purpose, and impact needs to be overarching over everything else that we want to do. Yes, we want to compete against each other. Yes, we want to build our benchmarks higher, but we also want to be in a place where we realize that we cannot survive without each other. And that is the key to success. And the last characteristic, leading with integrity. You know, today's world, we talk about integrity. We all have these brilliant values that we put up there, but very few actually practice it to a degree that makes us unique in the eyes of our clients, both internal and external. Let's face it, are we the kind of organization that is like a movie? When they put out the trailer, they make it look really, really, really good. But when you actually go and watch the movie, it doesn't work out like that. Do we have the same experience with our people internally? And based on our interaction with our external clients, do we promise what we don't deliver? How long can you last like that? All right. So it's important to understand integrity is as critical as every facet of what we do in an organization. So when you think about integrity, think about it from a perspective of, are we considerate for each other? Can I do my job if somebody else doesn't do their job? Are you very happy to turn around and say, look, I've done my bit, now it's your problem? If we have that kind of a culture within an organization, the financial impact of something like that is tremendous. And you'll be surprised at how much of an impact that is. Because the financial impact of a culture that is not seeped in working together will be quite astronomical when you think about it. And when you actually do put the numbers together, you'll realize that these numbers are actually quite impactful, where if you were able to shore up these things, a lot of the hard work you put in to try and get new business will actually bring you repeat business instead. All right. So always continuously evolve and learn. Challenge yourselves. We keep comparing ourselves with each other. All right. But in reality, the key comparison should be, am I a better version of myself compared to where I was last year? If I'm able to know that in this 1 year, I've actually read this many books, I've attended this much training, I've actually spoken to these many people, and I've actually learned a lot, how am I actually taking all of this and making an impact for the organization? For me, that is the key to a successful individual. That is somebody who is emotionally intelligent, because they're no longer being in a place where they feel, I have to overcome this particular individual. All right, it's about overcoming yourself. So with these 4 characteristics, let's look at an example of how financially we're able to impact something. Look at employee turnover. All right. I've looked at it from a perspective of there being a financial impact and a human impact. So when you think about financial impact, all of us think about these things. So look at leave pay that we have to pay, because when somebody decides to leave, all right, whatever is due to them in terms of their leave, all right, has to be paid. The cost of recruiting, the amount of time you spend interviewing, all right, when you actually do bring in external people, they cost a lot more, and they kind of, bring about a mismatch between what you're paying people internally, which means you may end up having to correct certain individuals internally. The amount of training that you have to do for these newcomers. And obviously, when you think about training, you've got to understand that there is a cost associated with the actual training, not to mention the loss of time that this person is not contributing completely. There is an admin cost in terms of bringing new people in, letting people go. And in some instances, we also have client losses, because this individual had a very good relationship with the client. And in some instances, you may lose the client. In some instances, the new person who's being asked to bring in their experience to actually negotiate or work with this new client will take a while to actually get to a place where they're comfortable with each other. Before I move on to human impact, these 7 things that I've mentioned in terms of financial impact, do you have a perspective of how much something like this would cost an organization? I'm open to ideas if anyone wants to contribute. Nobody? All right, let me give you a perspective. You know, there's a lot of research that's being done out there. All right, I'll show you one example from the US, but I actually want to give you a perspective of how it would look like in countries that are developing as such. When somebody at a junior level leaves, all right, the cost to the organization, if they leave within 1 year, okay, we're talking about the first year now. The cost of somebody junior leaving the organization within 1 year is usually between 2 to 4 months' salary. And you might ask how. When you take these 7 things into account, you're actually able to monetize how much it's costing you to have somebody leave the organization. The argument that usually comes back is, I can replace this person at a junior level within a week. Why would I lose that much money? Now, when you think about somebody who's been there for a year and you've lost them, all right, you've trained them, you've spent time recruiting them, you've spent time interviewing, you've spent time, if you've actually paid an agent to bring this person in, all right, you've actually brought in senior people into the induction of the individual. You've spent time, effort, and energy to actually incorporate these people into the system. All right, and whoever their clients are, in this case, maybe internally, all right, they have to start building all these relationships again. When you put that impact together, it actually comes up to between 2 and 4 months as such. When you think about that same thing at a middle management level, that number goes up to between 4 to almost 9 months. Yes, 4 to 9 months at middle management level. And at the senior most level, all right, we're talking about anything between 10 months to 2 years of the individual's gross pay. So when you think about it from that perspective, you realize that losing people is really hard. The reason why we don't feel this pain today is because these numbers are not reflected as a separate line in your P&L and balance sheet. Put yourself in the shoes of, let's say, a bank. All right, let's say you are the HR director of a bank, and you have the corporate side, you have the retail side, you have all the other entities that support the bank. You have the head of corporate banking who is told, you have to bring in this much business. For them to bring this much business, they have a budget with which they have to bring this much. Can you imagine if that budget aspect incorporated loss of individuals leaving the organization, which today it doesn't? Those numbers that they are expected to achieve in terms of revenue will shoot up tremendously. Because to them, it's not my job to recruit, it's an HR's job to recruit. So they don't see the costs. But if they actually were to be made accountable for those costs, it would hurt. It would hurt in a way they would actually think twice about letting somebody who is a non-performer or somebody who is an average performer continue to operate at an average level. They would want all of their people to be superstars. All right. There's also the flip side, the human impact side. There is reduced productivity. all right, in terms of when somebody leaves the organization, let's say they give you 2 months or 3 months notice, those 3 months are almost a write-off. They're not going to be operating at their highest level. That's number one. Number two, lower morale, all right? When somebody decides to leave for a specific reason, all right, you can bet that that reason is not significant to them only. It's hitting everybody else around them. So when they start to see an individual leaving, they realize why this individual is leaving. The fact that they got lucky and found another job is kudos to them. But then the rest are stuck in this particular feeling that, oh my God, we still have to face the challenge that he was facing. The third part is the information that walks out of the door when somebody walks out, all right? Unless you have a really robust data capturing information system, you're going to struggle. Because even if you have the most sophisticated one, what a human being has, the ability to connect different dots together to make it robust, is something you're going to lose anyway, all right? And then obviously when the person leaves, the void that is felt by the others who have to take it up. So all of this put together becomes quite a huge loss to the organization. And as HR people, if we don't understand how to monetize this and talk to the business leaders or the divisional leaders about what kind of an impact this kind of thing has, all right, you're going to lose out. Let me ask you a rhetorical question. How many of you are still measuring, for example, people who leave your organization in terms of percentages? So your attrition rate. Let's say for a whole year, you had an attrition rate of about 15%. If you're reporting 15% as an attrition rate until today, my sincere apologies, but you're not doing your job. Because that is not useful information. 15% attrition rate does not tell me a story. All it tells me is 15% of our people have left, and hopefully if you're decent enough, you'll have replaced them. But what does that tell me as an organization? Well, think about it differently. I would prefer, all right, and I actually instituted this when I was in the corporate world. And it was a measure that was hit, that came very hard hitting to the organization. Out of those 15%, how many of them would you have loved to retain? Who you consider to be serious talent? If your answer is 15%, you've got a serious problem. If your answer is 2%, then you don't have much of a problem. But if you keep losing your talented individual to the competition or to other organizations out there, then you need to do something serious about it. So if you're measuring those that have walked out that you would prefer to have retained as a measure, as a metric, it becomes much more powerful when you're talking to the senior managers. Because there, you're starting to show, listen, this person was identified as a high potential. Can I really afford to lose this individual? All right, do we have what it takes to retain them? Why are they leaving? All right, that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation, which a lot of organizations and HR needs to play a part in it, but doesn't need to manage it, is this concept of staying in the organization. Why do people stay in your organization? It's very important to understand that. A lot of us don't even bother to ask that question until when somebody is leaving the organization. We want to know why they're leaving. Well, find out why they're staying. If the reason why they're staying is because they cannot find another job elsewhere, we have a problem, unless they're a talent. So if you're actually getting to a place where you feel, oh my God, I have too much dead wood in the organization because these people really cannot find jobs elsewhere, and they're just doing enough and they're not really stretching themselves and helping the organization grow and develop, and may not necessarily have the skill sets to grow with the organization in the future, you need to address that either by talking to these individuals, training them up if possible, and if they don't want to, let them go. It's a hard thing to do, but it is what brings about results. All right. Now, this is the example I was referring to earlier on with regards to how something like this is actually measured and is costing in the US. For those roles that actually pay less than $30,000, all right, it's costing 16% of the annual salary. So when you actually add all of these up, the people that leave at a low paying level, you'll find that it's costing you a lot of money, which you kind of think you're budgeting, but you really don't. Because what happens is, this is where the finance people who always kind of put a certain pot aside for unforeseen circumstances, these kind of expenses go into that black hole, which is pretty sad. Because what happens there is we're not holding people accountable. For positions between $30,000 and $50,000, it's 20% of one's annual salary. And if you actually, again, calculate all of this, can you imagine if you were to actually do this for the last 3 years as an HR? All right. Let's take, for example, you are an organization that has 1,000 employees and you have an attrition rate of about 10%. And you calculate these costs. I'm not saying it's the same cost. All right. But if you calculate that and you realize that this is the amount that we're losing by actually getting all of these people leaving and then bringing new people in, if you took this number and said to the senior management, this is what turnover is costing, I am asking you for a quarter of this amount of money, all right, as HR, to be able to do something to address this attrition rate. Do you think you will be in a position to be accepted, that position to be accepted or not? Why not? If you can prove that this is what it's costing us, why would somebody refuse to give you a quarter of that? You need to start moving yourselves into that kind of a mindset. How do I find money from within? Or how do I ensure that whatever I'm asking for, I can give back the company threefold or fourfold? That's the kind of an HR person that we are required to become in the future. Because if you cannot think and address or articulate your proposals like this, chances are it's very easy for the senior management to say, yeah, we know it's a nice thing to have, but we're really tight right now. We can't bring this money to you, or we cannot give you this budget at this point in time. So it's quite interesting. Now, one thing that I want you to think about, for a lot of the developing world, you might think that this particular number is quite high, but believe it or not, it's actually higher in developing countries. So 16% at the lower level might be 20%. 20% might be 25 as such. And the higher one, all right, might be even higher. Because one of the biggest challenges we face in developing countries, especially, for example, my understanding of the continent of Africa, all right, finding serious talent, local talent, is very hard, especially at some of the very senior levels. So when you lose senior people, you actually stand to lose a lot. So it's important for you to understand how to monetize something like this. And you can do your own research. You don't have to depend on somebody else to do this research for you. All right. Let's look at some of the metrics now. All right. Now, the metrics that I want to talk about today is, there are two types of metrics. I've called them first tier metrics and the second tier metrics. Let's talk about productivity. All right. How do you look at productivity today? Now, a lot of organizations already do this part quite well. All right. They look at the amount of money that we spend, all right, in people versus what we get back in production. So when you think about it, today, my costs, all right, people cost per year is $1 million. All right. and I'm getting $10 million in return of productivity. So technically each individual person, all right, contributes about $10 an individual in terms of productivity. Question, has anybody in HR ever asked, what if we reduced this 1 million to 800,000? Would we still be able to deliver 10 million, or can we be delivering even 12? Again, I say that with the utmost respect. I don't want people to walk away thinking that by bringing that number down from 100,000 to 800,000, I'm advocating for people to be fired. There are different ways for people to actually for people costs to be reduced without you actually firing people. One example I'll give you. You have the ability to actually ask yourselves how much work is being done by each individual. Are they occupied 100% of the time? Or is this 1 million that I'm paying right now equivalent to an average of between 60 and 70% productivity from the individuals? What would happen if I don't hire new people and increase the people's productivity from 60% to 75%? So as opposed to having a budget for new hires, you actually work from within to actually deliver 12 million. And that, if you do it extremely well, is a possibility. It is not something that is impossible. So it's quite imperative as an HR person, you start asking these awkward questions. 2, look at the first one, that under recruiting. The number of overall days that key positions were vacant due to recruiting. A lot of us have a measure within the organizations that we work in terms of days to fill a position. Every time I see that, even during my early days in the world of the corporate world as such, I didn't understand the reason for that particular metric. So a lot of organizations will have, or when a position becomes vacant, I will fill it in within 6 weeks, or 2 months, or 3 months, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. How does you actually addressing that metric or fulfilling that metric help you find the right person? 80% of the time you can probably fulfill that metric. 20% of the time you might not get the right individual. Are you still going to force yourself to take somebody who is not capable just to fulfill that metric? For me, that doesn't make sense. So by giving you this particular metric here, I've done 2 things. 1, I've asked you to have a metric, but only for key positions. Positions that you know are risks. People who, if who were to leave, you would have a serious challenge replacing them. Here brings another equation to the table. A lot of organizations are reactive when it comes to recruitment. We don't need recruiters to be recruiting 365 days of the year. Let's say they spend 180 to 200 days of the year recruiting. What are they doing for the balance of the days of 165? During those 165 days, I have always asked the recruiters to actually be proactive. Look at all the risk positions, start understanding who is who in the marketplace, dig, network, go and attend conferences, find people that you would not normally meet anywhere else, and ensure that you're actually able to talk to these individuals, interview them, make sure they're part of your database for the future. Because when and if you need an individual, all right, you don't start looking at that point in time. That defeats the very purpose, which increases your costs. So your ability to address that need much earlier addresses your ability to add value, save money for the organization, and try and bring in the individual seamlessly where nothing is affected internally as well as externally. All right. Look at the second one in terms of appraisal scores. All of those, all right? How have the new hires been? Are we holding ourselves accountable for the people we're bringing in? Or are we just saying, this one didn't fit, we'll get somebody else? What is your success rate? A lot of us sit in the place where we're hiring millennials today. And we have this stigma that we attach to millennials that says it's very hard to find millennials who think like the old people, who are very focused, who are very stable, who are not looking for, managerial positions after 2 years. Well, if you actually do recruit right, you'll be surprised how important this particular metric is. And the mistake a lot of organizations tend to make is they recruit for the job and not for the organization. What do I mean by that? When you recruit for the job, you're actually looking for somebody that fits your job description. In reality, you need to actually hire for the organization. If the person has 70% of the skill set required to do the job and 30% they don't have it, question you need to ask yourself, do they have the potential to grow further? Do they fit within our cultural and values as such? Then you need to start thinking about whether they would actually be in a position to do the job well or not. Because the worst mistake we make is to just look at the job description and say, this is it. We can't afford to do that anymore. All right. You have to ask the managers who these people take on. Are they satisfied? Again, you're challenging yourself to actually a metric that we've never measured before. How many of them leave? Were they promised something and they were not given? And how many of them feel very strongly about what they were promised and it wasn't delivered? All right. How many of the people that we're bringing in are people that we want to groom? Are we just bringing in people to just fill the job? Or are we bringing people where we think about succession planning? Do we have successors for every position that we want? All right. Retention. How many of these people stay? All right. It's important to ask yourself how many of these people we really wanted to stay and we don't want them to leave, just like I was talking about earlier. All of these measures are very critical. All right. HR costs. When you think about HR costs, how effective do you think you would be able to measure what your budget is and the spend that you make in terms of what you give back to the organization? Has anyone asked themselves this question? Yeah. I have a budget of 500,000 in HR. What am I giving back to the organization for that 500,000? How would you monetize something like that? Think about it. I'll give you one example, and I'm sure you can come up with the rest. For those of you that do engagement surveys, there is enough research out there that you can read up on that says for every 1% increase in the engagement score of the organization, it adds 5% to the bottom line. 5% for a 1-point increase in engagement score. Again, engagements are not your domain solely. It's the whole organization. If you are able to articulate this in such a way that shows the connection between engagement and productivity, you will realize that your 500,000 is paid off, all right, by just increasing your percentage in terms of engagement by just a few points. So you need to understand how to monetize what your budget is and showcase how you bring back that money. The fifth one under the first tier metrics, how many people are happy with you in HR? Especially the people that you have to deal with on a regular basis, especially the managers of people. I know we all do these surveys where we talk about satisfaction levels, but how many of us actually get to a place where we actually monetize this and say, I'm willing to put my bonus online, that if I am going to get a satisfaction score of, let's say on 5, of less than 3.5, it's going to be a key derailer of my bonus. Are we willing to put ourselves up there? These are the key questions we need to ask ourselves. So in as much as we want to be those financial partners with the business, we've also got to put ourselves on the line. Second tier metrics. All right. Second tier metrics. We're looking at compensation and benefits. How much does it cost per individual person that we actually have in the organization to generate whatever it is we wish to generate in terms of revenue? Is that a number that we are happy with? How does that benchmark itself against competition? Or for that matter, if you're number one, do we even want the competition to catch up with us? How do we keep evolving to make sure that we're actually doing more with less? All right. How many times do we do these engagement surveys? And one of the sections that we look at is the compensation aspect, where we ask our people, are you happy with your compensation? And 99% of the time, people will say they're not. If they're not happy, when was the last time you engaged with people and asked them the question? You say you're not satisfied with your compensation, right? I mean, let's face it, if everybody were to be paid $100,000 a month, there'll always be somebody out there who will say, I'm not happy. But the point is, what is a fair salary to be paid? When you ask individuals, ask them, what is it that you think is fair and why? And then start to give them a perspective of, do you realize for every dollar we spend, all right, for the organization to make money, we have to earn 10 times more. The problem, unfortunately, with compensation and benefits and where people are not happy with their compensation is they don't understand the mechanics of how you make your money and where you spend your money. Because a lot of times it is shrouded in secrecy. The fact that there is no transparency, unfortunately, falls into a place where we feel, or the employees feel, they're being taken for a ride. However, if you are really, really in a place where you realize that if they understand how we make our money and how we spend our money, they will work doubly hard to make sure that their dollar gives them that 10 times more, they will do it. But right now, we treat them like they are the enemy, which is not the case. Employee relations, all right? How many times have you done an exit interview where an individual tells you that I'm leaving because I'm not happy with this particular manager? And how many times have we actually taken action on it? Sometimes the individual is really well connected. Therefore, you can't fire the individual, which is pretty sad, because in reality, what it's doing is it's adding to your cost to the bottom line. But if the individual is really well connected, how am I actually going to tell the manager or the managing director or the CEO, we need to fire this person because they're not doing a great job? If this person finds out I've gone and spoken to the MD or the CEO, I'll be fired. How do you have these difficult conversations? And whether we like to accept it or not, but as an HR person, you have to learn to have these difficult conversations. And you need to know when to have these conversations. You just don't blurt something like that out. You need to learn to understand how, when, and why you are actually going to say what you're going to say with a view to justify it. I'll give you an example. A lot of times as HR people, we get told by somebody at the very senior level, we're not doing very well. We have to let go of certain individuals because we need to make the bottom line. And how many of us just start thinking, oh my God, okay, let's find out who are the people who are not performing, and maybe we can start to ease them out. Well, I was very fortunate at a very early point in my career that I had somebody who actually taught me that that is the worst thing you can do in any scenario. The best thing you can do is ask the question. Why is firing people the only way to actually add to our bottom line to shore up our losses? When you start to ask that kind of a question, you start to evaluate where else can we find this money. And believe it or not, almost 70 to 80% of the time when I've worked in the corporate world, I've managed to find that money elsewhere. And the only reason I've been able to find that money elsewhere is because I have a grip on what our finances are all about. Where do we spend our money? If you don't have the ability to actually make that connection, then what you end up doing is doing exactly the same thing that you've been asked to do, which is firing people. And in some instances, these people have to go, not because they're bad performers, but because you have to find that money from a bottom line perspective. So it's quite important to realize that your understanding and your grip on the financials of the organization is very critical. All right. Turnover. How many of those that are actually being allowed to leave are actually people you'd like to keep? How many of those that are rated lowly in performance management are actually given a chance to learn? I've always asked myself this question. When an individual is seen as a low performer, all right, and I actually get called by the divisional manager or the director of that particular department, and I'm told, listen, we need to put this person on PIP, on a performance improvement program, all right, because they're not really performing. My first question is not to ask what the individual has done wrong. My first question is, what have you done to address this person's shortfall? Because in as much as they have, the individual who is not performing has a responsibility, the person who is the head of the department has a responsibility in grooming that individual. And if we don't start asking these kind of questions, what will end up happening is we'll keep having this churn, people being asked to go on PIP and eventually being asked to leave, which is wrong. Sometimes the role that they're actually being asked to fulfill is not suitable. 2, it might be that they've not been taught. And 3, worse still, all right, the individual is being blocked from every aspect because somebody above them is not giving them a chance. Do we actually dig that deep? Then we look at training and development. A lot of times when we look at training and development, we look at it from a perspective of how many days of training we send our people. I want us to start thinking about, for those people that go on training, number 1, the first thing you need to do, forget metrics as such. When somebody gets sent on training, the first thing you need to do is to ask them to actually come and train the rest of the team on what they have learned if they have not had the opportunity to be exposed. For me, that's a given. That should not even be negotiable. Then we start looking at metrics. When this individual was sent, I sincerely hope this individual has been sent for that training because They were there to learn about something new or correct a deficiency within themselves. And because they are actually, let's say, correcting a deficiency within themselves, they are actually going to be in a position to produce more. So if they're in a position to produce more, how much more is that equitable to the bottom line? And if they're there to learn something new, how much more are they adding to the bottom line? That metric becomes a lot more powerful than just having the number of training days each individual person needs to go through. All right. So again, there is another aspect that I would really like to bring to the table here, which is how many individuals actually pursue self-development. For me, that is really powerful, as opposed to having individuals wait for the organization to do something for them. How many of them don't even bother? They just go out there and do what it takes because they want to better themselves. When you start collecting that kind of information, you'll be surprised you are actually looking at your talents before even identifying them as talents. The next one, generalist activities. All right. In many departments, all right, what is the satisfaction level that we have for individuals that we actually service? Are we actually helping them grow? When somebody comes to you and speaks to you confidentially, I really am not doing very well because I'm having a challenge, maybe a challenge at home. And I'm not being in a place where I feel I'm actually helping the team. How do you take something like that and turn it around into making it very powerful? Are you able to motivate the individual or help the individual resolve that issue? That will bring that person back to that high level of productivity. 2, are you in a position to have that kind of a conversation with the team to say, listen, we need to help this individual. All right, they're going through a difficult time. And in reality, we need to help him go through this difficult time. He may not be as productive as he's always been in the past, but like everybody else, we all have personal problems from time to time. Each one of us will have something like that. When that time comes, we'll all band together. We're building a culture of camaraderie there. Okay. Then we talk about, the goals that we've set for ourselves. When you think about goals that we set for ourselves in HR, usually we think about it from a perspective of, okay, I had to hire this many people. I had to make sure that these many trainings were done. Well, I would throw all of that out of the window. Going forward, I would say one of the key HR goals for me, all right, within the HR fraternity is to ensure that I'm upskilling each and every individual to actually produce 1.5 times more than what they have produced in the previous year. Secondly, I want to be in a position where I'm actually fulfilling, where I have a budget of $500,000 and I'm going to give the company back a minimum of 2, if not 3 times that number back in terms of the initiatives that we take forward. 3, I'm going to delight my clients internally, whereby I'm going to make sure that I have a satisfaction score of 4 out of 5 minimum. When you start thinking on those lines, you start to move to a place where you're actually contributing a lot more than we've ever contributed in the past. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the future. Now, when we think about the future, what is it looking like? Well, I think the pandemic has proven to us that the digital platform is by far the most critical platform we're going to have in terms of how work is going to occur in the future. Now, as much as I'm not a fan of, for example, training people online or conducting 3-4 hour meetings online, but if there is no choice, we have to make it happen. However, does it really make sense for us to have 4 or 5 hour meetings online? Shouldn't we change the way we operate to actually make ourselves a lot more efficient? How do we make sure that we are connecting with people, despite them not being physical in front of you? How do we make sure we retain our cultural values? This is a key driver, which is a separate topic on its own, that has a course on its own in terms of how do we ensure that the digitization of the workplace becomes the norm of the future? How do you embed a culture in it as such? One of the things that we've discovered with the pandemic, all right, is a lot of the people that in the past who worked in offices and were seen as decent or good managers were failing miserably when they had to manage their people online. And there are quite a few reasons for this, but you will be surprised. The main reason why these people failed is because they realized they can no longer rule people by fear, which is what happens in the office scenario. Because people are sitting in front of you, there is an element of people being scared and people conforming because they have no other choice. However, when you are online, you can't force people to do certain things because the modality of how work occurs online is very different. So a lot of what needed to change was a lot of these managers were required to actually manage with empathy and love, which was lacking in them. So they failed miserably. So if you are hiring for an organization that in the future may have to have an online scenario or setup, be very careful about how you hire. It's no longer the same kind of characteristics. 2, talent management. The future of work is going to change, whereby what worked in the past is not going to work in the future. So it's quite important for you to realize that you will need to learn how to manage this diversity in terms of those that can work within the office space, those that will work remotely, and remotely is not only within the country, all right, even outside the country. So you'll be surprised at how difficult it is to manage that diversity if you've not thought about it and planned for it. Compensation and benefits is an interesting one, because compensation and benefits, all right, traditionally has been easy for us to manage because everyone's sitting there and everyone's within a certain pay range or a pay scale or a banding structure. Well, interestingly, the future of work is such, you will find that the expertise potentially may lie with individuals who want to work 3-day weeks or 4-day weeks. There are some individuals who will only work in the mornings and not work in the afternoons. All right. There are some individuals who will actually work on a project by project basis. All of these things will need to be factored in. From a perspective where your compensation structure, as uniform as it is today, will have to be broken because it no longer fits the model of the future. So you better start thinking about it right now if you haven't already. Mobility. Mobility is big. It's always been big, but now it's going to get bigger because we're now starting to look at hiring people from all over the world, sitting wherever they are, doing the kind of things that we wanted them to do, ideally sitting in an office place. So that is going to change as well. HR. Now, here I am saying HR will become fully digital. I would like to put in a caveat here. HR should digitize where necessary. What it cannot digitize is the human aspect of the organization. People will still be required to actually interact with people. What you're trying to digitize is the kind of things that are mundane. You cannot digitize where you have, at this point in time at least, a robot that is so artificially intelligent, it has the ability to have a conversation with a member who is unhappy about something. We don't have that ability yet. It may come in the future, but we're not there yet. And even when that does happen, I guarantee you, we will still need human beings to be able to ensure that all of these things happen correctly. So ensure that your people and yourselves are growing on a regular basis. Encourage people to continuously develop themselves. All right, network. Ensure that HR continuously evolves to actually finding itself to being at the topmost of the value chain within an organization. The concept of culture and change will always be constant. You always need to try and maintain your key foundational culture. You will need to tweak it from time to time, depending on the level of people you're hiring, the age of the people you're hiring, but you cannot afford to compromise on your core principles. And change, if people don't understand how to manage change on a regular basis, they're not people that need to be in an organization, because change is going to be constant. It's always happening on a regular and daily basis. And you will be surprised at how many people struggle with this because they're very happy at status quo. I've put together here a list as such of what the role of the future ought to be from an HR perspective. There's so many things that I've listed here. I'm not going to go into each and every one of them. I believe this particular presentation will be made available to all of you who is on the on this call, and to all the members. All right, but I would like to highlight a few things. The one that I feel very, very passionate about is the third one. A lot of times we look at the status quo and think we're very happy because it's organized. Unfortunately, the world we live in does not allow us to accept status quo. And the constant change and the constant evolvement and the constant things that bombard our organization that force us to change is always going to happen. So you need to fine-tune your strategies in such a way that you're able to address anything that hits you, no matter how difficult it is. Think back at the pandemic. How many organizations would you say were prepared to actually face a challenge like the pandemic? And I'm not talking about people being infected, about business being infected. I'm talking about very, very few. In fact, the research shows less than 1% of organizations were anticipating something catastrophic happening and actually making a difference. So you'll be surprised at how anticipatory an organization can be and proactive when things are not going their way and they're able to address and weather the storm. So that's one. All right. Number two that I want to actually talk about is something that I've already mentioned in my presentation, but I want to highlight it again. It's trying to change HR from being a cost center to a profit enabling center. I cannot stress enough about this one. You have got to learn to monetize every facet of what you do. You've got to understand the business. You've got to understand the numbers. That, for me, is key. All right. The other one that I wanted to point out is from filling gaps in jobs to unlocking human potential. Learn to understand human being, human psyche, and understand behavior in human beings. Earlier on, I talked about a lot of organizations probably have people that are performing at between 60 and 70% of their capacity. You, as somebody who understands human beings, human behavior, have the ability to actually unlock the extra 30 to 40%. If you unlock that 30 to 40%, you are going to be one of the most valuable people in any organization, let alone the one that you're in. So it's important to understand that you have that key, the golden key. You just need to open that door. You open that door, you can actually open that, use that key to open any door. And the last one that I want to point out is from a one-size-fits-all model across the organization to a one-size-breaks-all. The example that I love to give here, for those of you that have kids, all right? If you have 2 or 3 kids, yeah, do they each come with an operating manual that says this kid needs to be treated like this kid needs to be treated like this, or this kid needs to be treated like this? We human beings are extremely complex beings. Something as simple as televisions, all right? When you buy a new television, you actually open, ideally, right, your operating manual and you'll start to set it up. Can you use the operating manual of a TV that you had 10 years ago to set it up? You can't. Why then do we actually treat our kids the same way? We want them to actually follow the same rules. We want them to grow up where they are competing against each other because one is very clever, one is average, one is a playful person. We still don't realize and understand that each and every child has its own strengths. Have we learned to understand those strengths? Have we learned to harness those strengths? Have we learned to listen for those strengths? The same thing occurs in organizations. I have worked for Compaq. We did something in a specific way there. So when I moved, all right, to MSD, the pharmaceutical, what I did there can actually be applied here. And we go back to the same concept we started at the beginning, which is copy and paste. It doesn't work like that anymore. So it's time for us to realize that there are certain things that can be foundational in that they remain the same. But even within that remaining the same, they need to evolve. So let's not fall into the trap of where one size fits all and try and customize solutions for every time. It's difficult, it's hard, but that's what it takes. All right. And last piece, what do you need to have individually to actually make this jump? Not only this jump, but every jump you have to take in your career. And I've put a list of these 10 things that I think are extremely critical if you actually want to be somebody who is going to be valuable in the economy of the future. All right, that, my friends, is the end of my presentation. I don't know how you guys have actually taken it. So I'm looking forward to hearing from yourselves, and hopefully there'll be a lot of questions.
Abdul, that was fantastic. It's a lot to digest. It's fascinating because we are really in a new era of HR, and really touching on all these different components that you have touched on has equally, embedded where we actually are in the HR era now. And, at the end of the day, we have to get moving, guys. A lot of great insights from you, Abdul. Number one, we must stop being HR police. It's a barrier, it's a no-no. That means you're back in the day. We must really understand each and every facet of the business, as Abdul has, critically and really highlighted in every section of his presentation. It's so important to be curious, so important to have integrity. I know majority of us have a fear of having difficult discussions, difficult conversations, but now we need to change that and face the music. Don't be scared. It's all about understanding. So I really like that point as well, Abdul. Having difficult conversations. People usually run away from them, and then the problem keeps lingering, you know? And of course, we don't have to, we're going into digitalization, as you said, Abdul, but we do not have to digitalize everything just to seem like we're ahead of the game. So we're going to go into our answer and question phase. If you want to say something, you may raise your hand, but I have a few questions that have been written online. So we'll start, we'll get going. So we have Peter Chanda. Peter Chanda is saying, this is very insightful, but what should an HR head do if after sharing or presenting a kind of loss impact to the CEO decides to ignore it?
All right, thank you very much for the question. I have a saying that I carry with me all the time in my head. And the saying that says, there are some battles that are worth losing, and there are some battles that have to be won. All right. So I've actually switched this around. I'm telling you there are some battles you have to lose. So when you actually do have these conversations with the very senior people in your organization, the worst thing you can do is present an idea to them where you're hoping to wow them at the last minute. The best way to tackle these kinds of things is to actually hit each and every individual member of that panel or of that group before you actually go into that final presentation, where you say, look, I'm looking to present something like this. All right, what do you feel about this? What are your insights? What are your inputs? So you're actually piloting what you are suggesting before you even present it. So that's step number one in my book. Step number two is you will obviously hear some of the objections that might come along with these individual interactions you will have. So once you understand what these objections are, and if you are able to address them, it becomes easier. And you need to ask yourself that question here. What this particular individual is looking for, is it worth giving up in the overall scheme of things? If it is, give it to them, because you need to look at the bigger picture and understand that what that bigger picture is worth winning. So once you understand these small little battles that are worth losing, you lose them. And then you need to act, once you've had all of these people on board, and then you hit the meeting itself, and you're actually able to showcase that you are actually making money for the organization. Remember, at that point in time, as much as the MD or the CEO has the veto power, the fact that everybody else around that table is already on board with you, all right, gives you tremendous support. Because at that point in time, you will have been able to showcase that it is workable, it is doable, there is tremendous value to be had, and you're actually making money. For any MD or CEO who vetoes that at that point in time, in my book, is not somebody who is emotionally intelligent, is somebody who is actually acting on a whim, because they have a hidden agenda which you may not be aware of at that point in time. So at that point in time, my advice would be to give up and not push the agenda very hard, but catch the individual outside of that meeting and say, I don't understand. Is there something that was missing? Try and understand that. What was that missing factor? And once you've understood that, the next time you will probably be in a better position to address that need that that individual had. That would be my approach.
Thanks, Abdul. We need to unmute Ahmed Khalifa. Can you unmute Ahmed? He has risen his hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. So thank you so much, Abdulhussain, for this presentation. It's very insightful. I really take it as a preamble of a big book. So you have touched a lot of points from one size fits all, from the value of employees leaving the organization, from selecting our battles, from integrating HR people to be more generalist, understanding the business, understanding the human side. I really feel like every point of them, you just touch base, and it needs a full chapter to be explained, challenged, digested, implemented. And my question would be very simple. How can we really engage HR directors to be really business oriented, to understand that policies and procedures are to be a framework, but the main objective of being in business is to do business. How to get alignment within the HR community and really within the business. So how to put it in a practical manner. It's good to know the rule, but it's better to implement it and get the buy-in of the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Ahmed. The answer is very simple. Hire me to come and train your HR people. No, that's a joke. You see, the way you actually bring HR people on board is to identify the new breed of HR people. The place, if you really want to address this, and I would suggest the forum, the ZHRM, has the ability to actually make a big impact, is to actually talk to the educational institutions that are teaching HR, to incorporate this into their curriculum, which I'm almost certain today does not exist in that way. Very few HR related courses or degrees have a finance component that is extremely detail oriented. They will probably teach one module where it talks about the financial data, but it doesn't talk about how HR monetizes itself to the organization. So for me, that would be a big win if that could be incorporated in the curriculum. That's number one. Number two, when you are hiring HR people, you've got to incorporate an aspect of them being numbers savvy, without which you will struggle. And if the majority of people out there don't have it, then as part of your induction within the organization for HR people, there has got to be this aspect of numbers being incorporated into their curriculum of onboarding. You cannot afford to ignore this completely at all. And number three is when you, for example, have HR directors, for example, or CHROs, the most senior people in your organization, as being individuals who are not numbers savvy, and you still think they are the right people for your organization because they fit the cultural values of the organization. Personally, I have seen myself at an early point in my career where I had a CEO take me under their wing and mentor me to actually understand the financials. So when you have something like that, take it as an opportunity and not as an area where you have no control over. Those are the three things that I would definitely want to incorporate within your answer for now, Ahmed. I hope that helps.
Very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we have quite a number of questions, but we have to get moving due to the time frame that was set for our webinar. So we have one from our council secretary, Malandula. So he says, hi Abdul, what are your thoughts on the usage of artificial intelligence in recruitment processes, such as shortlisting, i.e. using machine learning technology to vet applicants?
Well, I've been on both sides, and oh, by the way, hi Malandula, nice to make your acquaintance again. Sorry about that, I got so busy answering the question. I have been on both sides where I've been on the side where I've been recruiting and I've had to actually sift through 4, 5, 6,000 CVs, and it's not a joke. And it's really painful an exercise. And I've been on the other side where I've been an applicant in the past where these systems have selected or deselected me because of certain aspects that they had put in as defining criteria. My opinion on this is continue to use these platforms that use artificial intelligence to make the selection process, but at the same time, refuse to accept these artificial intelligence systems as being complete. I would push the providers to continuously evolve and change it to ensure that some of the good candidates are not thrown out as well. So I would suggest if you are in a place where you're getting that kind of volume, anything above 1,000 is very challenging to actually go through each and every individual one. I would suggest you actually try and work with a system that has the ability or the flexibility to ensure that it just doesn't look at these criteria. It has the functionality of what we have in Excel in terms of and or, so that the good ones are actually kept in as opposed to be throwing them out because they may not have one particular aspect. On the flip side of you not using them is if you have a very large team that can actually do the sifting, I prefer that, but obviously it's time consuming and can be counterproductive in terms of value add. So what I would prefer to do is to partner with an agency that actually understands your values, understands the kind of individuals you're looking for, and actually does look at each and every individual that has the ability to fulfill the criteria that you've set out for them. So that is a solution where you're actually looking to outsource your recruitment to others out there, but make sure you have the right partner, because you don't want to partner with somebody who doesn't really kind of mirror your culture and your values as such.
Okay, I'll take 2 more questions, Abdul. So we have one from Kaluba Kelvin, and he says, the HR role of the future has been with us for the last 15 years. However, the more we attempt to change HR into a strategic fit, the more confusion we create. What is the problem and how can it be addressed? Kelvin Kaluba, IABC Associates.
All right, thank you very much, Kelvin. You know, the question you are posing is actually not a very difficult one to respond to. Let me give you a corollary to this that would help you hopefully understand. A lot of us actually make a commitment at the beginning of the year. For example, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to go to the gym. All right. I am going to make sure that I don't eat fatty foods. My diet is going to be the best. 95% of people that make these kind of promises based on research shows that they fail miserably. And the reason they fail miserably is because they look at what is out there. Oh, that guy has got this, you know, biceps and, you know, this, whatever, 6-pack, or that lady fits really well into her clothes, right? I want to be like that. A lot of times we set expectations for ourselves at a level that is unbecoming of our ability to make that jump. And because of that, we keep failing in making this jump that you're talking about to becoming strategic in nature. What we need to do is to try and understand, what does it take for an HR person to become strategic? We need to break it down into smaller chunks. And we need to try, sorry, we need to try to aim for each individual piece at a time. You can't eat the whole elephant. You can only eat the elephant piece by piece. That's exactly what we need to do. And for individuals who are struggling to make this strategic jump, they need to try and take chunk-sized bites to enable themselves to make that big jump. Don't try and do everything at once. That's the secret to it.
Thank you for that, Abdul. We'll just take one last question. And by the way, you do have a lot of accolades out there, Abdul, on the chat. It's really fascinating. Everybody's saying thank you. Thank you for the great insights. You're looking really powerful words here. We need to look at it. When
Thank you. I'm trying at the same time, looking at the questions and trying to answer the question.
Fantastic. So we do have a question from Tiwonge. She's asking, question, what strategies should HR practitioners put in place to have an effective talent management system?
Sorry, just repeat that again.
What strategies should HR practitioners put in place to have an effective talent management system?
Can you ask, are we talking about a software or are we talking about a strategy?
I'm assuming she's talking more of strategy.
Okay. So, I mean, when you think about a talent management system, it is not something that I can answer in one go in a very short period of time. But what I will say is a talent management strategy starts with understanding the strategy of the organization. And every time I train, I make a very hard point about this. To address a problem that you don't know is going to be a problem, you have to know where you're going. So if you don't understand where it is you're heading towards, and then work backwards in terms of understanding what will it take for us to deliver this strategy, what you'll end up doing is putting a band-aid over the challenges. So if you understand your strategy, you understand, then move backwards into saying, okay, now I know what I have to deliver. What are the things that I need to put in place in terms of people, in terms of systems, in terms of processes, in terms of compliance, all right, in terms of financials, in terms of budgets, all of those things come to play. Once you've done that, you then break it down into the silos. And when you come to the people side of things, you'll realize that recruiting right is critical. Once you've recruited right, you onboard people right. Once you've onboarded them right, you ensure that they are continuously evolving in terms of developing themselves. Once they've developed themselves, you are actually promoting them, both from a positional perspective in terms of salary perspective, and you're always challenging them, giving them work that is continuously giving them a place where they feel I am continuously evolving and learning. Because you'll be surprised, as much as people tell you that I'm going to earn a lot more money elsewhere by going elsewhere, I have seen enough examples in my corporate world where people have been offered a lot more money and they have turned it down because they continuously learn in an organization. And learning is a very powerful motivator. So if you're able to address this aspect from strategy all the way down to understanding how to deliver that strategy and the mechanics of the parts that go into achieving that strategy, you'll be surprised, but you will actually have a very powerful talent management tool in hand.
Okay, thank you for that, Abdul. I hope that pretty much shapes what you were looking for, Tiwonge, as it was more on the strategy side. So on this note, we just really like to encourage you to keep joining the webinars we put out there. The whole essence is to educate the masses that we can and looking at things in the eras that we're in at the moment, and ways to better make us more efficient in everything we do, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, whether it's logistics, procurement, across the board. As we're going into that era now, okay, we must be in all facets of the business. We do have another poll which we'd like you to fill in. It will pop up just to get your feel of how much you took away, how much you enjoyed the session. We really hope you all did, and we do thank you for that. We do encourage you. We also rolled out a survey to all our members out there. We do encourage you to kindly take the time to fill it in. This will help us know how to address your needs and do things in a faster pace for you. I'd just like to shift over to our Vice President to do the closing remarks. And thank you once again, Abdul. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Vice President, over to you. Vice President, you're on mute. May you kindly unmute yourself? Thanks.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, so I was just saying that I would like to thank you, Mazila, for hosting us this afternoon, as well as thank Mr. Tejani for navigating us through an incredibly important subject matter. I think this afternoon, sitting from where I'm sitting, I can easily attest that a number of thought-provoking, propositions have been made and heard in this session, and I can only encourage all of us to take them to heart, so that we can create and sustain credible and capable HR functions that are physically responsible and that are future ready. I think that's the whole reason why we are having these webinars and these interactions. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day is we want to evolve from being merely HR experts, to becoming business leaders in every sense of the word. So I think one of the key takeaways that I have from this session is that we need to acquire business acumen, that will get us to a stage where we command respect, on the leadership table. One former CEO in a tech company once said that great CHROs speak out on any business issue, okay? Anything that raises to the executive leadership team is fair game. So meaning there's no subject that, accomplished and consummate HR practitioners or executives will shy away from. They are more than willing to contribute and give their insights on any issue that is brought to the table. And I think that's the wish of the 14th Council, that by having these interactions, we'll get to the position where as HR practitioners will evolve our practice and then begin to make valuable valuable to the businesses that we support. So I would like to thank you, Mr. Tejani, so much for availing yourself and your insights, your thought leadership. We thank you so very much, and we will still continue to call on you to help unpack some of these issues that that continue to confuse some of us who are still grappling with some of these issues. And in any case, learning does not end. So for us, we'll continue to have these interactions. I would also want to express gratitude to all the attendees who joined us on this webinar, both locally and internationally. I gathered from the onset of this session that we had quite a couple of participants coming all the way from the World Bank, from Europe. We thank you so much for joining us. I think this shows us the power of our media, our digitally connected world, and how we can how it can bring all of us together, to have great learning experiences. To speak more directly to members of our institute, we would like to encourage, as has already been said by President and our host Mazila, that would like to encourage you to avail yourselves for any planned webinars and discussion forums. I know that this and the earlier webinar that we had were complimentary, meaning that we didn't have to pay anything for them. But going forward, we'll be asking of our members that we pay a modest fee, to help the institute raise funds, as well as be able to meet our obligations and overhead, so that we can continue being a going concern. So we look forward to support from members in that regard. Then lastly, would want to encourage all our members to participate in the ongoing membership satisfaction survey that we launched on July 26th. It's still ongoing, and would like to encourage everyone to participate, to give us their feedback, so that we know what sort of offerings we need to deliver to our members, and how we can basically improve on our value proposition as an institute. So that said, I would like to thank Mr. Tejani. I would like to thank the President, as well as our host this afternoon, Mazila, and everybody present on this webinar. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you, Vice President Lwendo Malungo. Thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. See you next time, and see you soon. Get the masses to come on board and enjoy what we have to share with you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. ZHRM, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tejani.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.